All right, on to the LessWrong posts then. Did you get a chance to get to them?
I did.
All right. Okay, our first LessWrong
You're familiar
post.
with the blog, right? Yeah.
LessWrong.com.
He's heard of it.
You can find some of Matt's posts at Mordinamail.
Mordinamail. That's my handle for everything.
All right, so translate that again for me from the ancient language.
Death of Hope.
Death of Hope.
Oh,
yeah.
wow.
It's the kind of handle you choose when you're 16.
Yes.
And then you never change.
I love it. No, I think it's great. I recognize the ancient language. Is that what it's called?
It's the old tongue.
The old tongue from Wheel of Time, which gives me shit for mentioning because it's the only long series I've ever read that wasn't Harry Potter. But yeah, I couldn't remember the word parts. Anyway, yes. So that.
Cool. Our first post was Your Strength as a Rationalist, which starts off as him telling about an thing that happened to him, an anecdote, as one will, in an IRC rather, chat room. Do people all know what IRC chat rooms are?
I think so.
Maybe
They still
explain
exist.
for our listeners.
Internet relay chat. It's basically Discord back before Discord existed. You would type in real time to people one line at a time, and everyone in the room could see it, and you would all just kind of chat like that.
You know how IRL is where you do that with MeetSpace? This was that, but in the computer. IRL, IRC. Perfect.
Yeah. Right. Anyways, someone was telling him that a friend of theirs needed medical advice over IRC, that he'd been having chest pains, and he called an ambulance, and the ambulance came, but the paramedics said nothing was wrong and left. And now the chest pains were getting worse. And Eliezer remembers that he was very confused by that story, that he remembered reading that paramedics always have to take someone to a hospital when they complain of chest pains because otherwise they risk being hit with a huge lawsuit if it actually was a heart attack, and they don't have to end up paying the person's bills. So as a matter of policy, you always take someone to the hospital. But he also remembered, he'd gone to the doctor complaining about chest pains before, and the doctor explained, it's not a heart attack, you have this or whatever. And every time he'd done that, the doctor had always been right. And so he was confused by the story, but he waved it off and said, yeah, the paramedics were probably right. And then it turned out his friend came back a little later, said that this friend of theirs made everything up entirely. And at that point, Eliezer begins the self-flagellation, where he says that he felt really bad about this because he had explained an entirely fictional story within his existing model by contorting his thought process to fit it. Mm-hmm. And he should have, at that period, as soon as he was confused, stopped and noticed and said, I don't think this is in the post, but it's become sort of a meme, or at least for a while, I notice I am confused, is the term that was used. Because whenever you are confused, that is a sign that either the story is wrong or something about your model is wrong. That if you can change your model to explain any anomaly, even one that never happened, I believe the line was, a hypothesis that forbids nothing, permits everything, and thereby fails to constrain anticipation.
And I wasn't in this post, but somewhere on the blog too, like the issue is that, like, that little note of disconcerting, like, confusion, mm-hmm. It's just a failure of human architecture that's not a blaring siren. Mm-hmm. It's just like a beep, that's confusing. Yeah. And part of the training that as a rationalist is to try and promote that to conscious attention when you notice it. And I make an effort of saying either in my head or out loud, I notice I'm confused, mm-hmm. if I'm confused by something. And that's one of the core principles of skepticism that Brian Dunning's articulated over the last 15 years of his podcast of, like, before you move mountains to try and explain some bizarre event that someone's describing to you, first things first, make sure it actually happened. That's a little more straightforward than trying to map something into your existing mental model and stuff. But it's the same. It's in essence shares a similar core, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. If I had to guess, I would say that this is some kind of artifact of having minds that evolved to make models. I mean, it would be, okay, it's raining, and now it stopped raining, and maybe God is crying. I don't know. Like, people kind of come up with stories to explain why things happen, and then they, I guess, like, corroborate them over time. And the model has some kind of explanatory power. I mean, we have, like, Newton's laws, which aren't exactly right, but they had explanatory power. But we have, like, as a species standing on the shoulders of giants who have actually done the math, we have good models now, and it makes a lot less sense for us to try to come up with an explanation than to kind of pause and be like, well, it makes more sense that this person was making something up. Although the thing with the paramedics, the first thing, of course, that jumped into my mind was, that's actually not true. The paramedics do not have to take you to the hospital if you refuse care.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, of course, you know, the Elias probably knew that, and that was probably one of the things that was disconfirmed early on. But like, it was just like, at me reading this story, I couldn't get that out of my head because I was like remembering a time when I was doing volunteer EMS and we showed up on scene of someone who had cut their finger off and they refused care. They're like, I'm just going to duct tape it back on.
Whoa.
Oh my god.
And we had to leave because you're not actually allowed to force somebody to the hospital if they don't want to. But we're like, dude, you really... Okay.
Do you just need like two people to affirm their verbal consent, or do you need them to sign something saying, okay, you're
they
telling
have to
us
sign something, or if they like are unable or, you know, uncooperative, but like you can use verbal consent. There's some like confusing legal stuff around it, but basically like
I remember an EMS person telling me that one time they went to someone who was having a heart attack and they refused care because it would be too expensive for them to go to the hospital.
that was the same reason this guy with the finger said that, because like even though we were the volunteer EMS unit, so it was like the ambulance ride is not going to cost anything and the care we give in the ambulance, but once we give you to the hospital, it's gonna probably like bankrupt you, unfortunately.
Yeah. And so the EMS team left, and she said like the whole time they were just hoping, I hope he falls unconscious soon and his wife calls us back, because once you're unconscious, you can't refuse care.
Consent,
yeah, and they show up. Oh, there's an unconscious guy. Looks like he's having a heart attack. To the hospital you go.
Yeah, if that fills you with this awesome sense of whatever, there's a great subreddit for that called A Boring Dystopia, where it's like the whole sentiment is like, oh yeah, I have decided to discontinue living because I can no longer afford it. Yeah.
My god.
Yes.
Yeah, one thing I think that both of the ones we're going to discuss today are on a similar topic, but like I find that people lie a lot, and it's a nice framing for being like I used to be a lot more credulous, and over time just been a lot quicker with the filter of, rather than thinking like, that's odd, that story doesn't quite make sense, but I'll just be like, that's bullshit. and like people lie so much, honestly. Like you're seriously like you're so likely to be right if you just assume people are lying if their story doesn't make sense.
They're not even necessarily lying out of bad faith. I remember when I was a little kid, my mom would just make shit up all the time. Like she would make up her own science facts, and like I really think that there's this human instinct to like there's a comfort in like having things make sense or there being some kind of story to something. But I remember one time my mom was like, bees aren't scary because they just want to drink the flowers, and I was just like, okay. And then another time I was wearing this floral bathing suit and a bee was buzzing around me, and Mom was like, don't worry, it just thinks you're a flower. But like before that she had told me bees go and sting flowers in order to like
sting flowers?
Yeah, she's like, the bees go sting the flowers in order to like drink the nectar, which she didn't know what the hell she was talking about. She just made that up. And then like, so of course she's like, oh, don't worry, it thinks you're a flower. And I'm like, oh, so it's gonna sting me to try to drink my nectar? Like, okay. And I remember being like, I forget, like, I think I was not going to school at that time, so I would have had to been like less than 5 years old and realizing my mom was full of shit. She's just making shit up. Like, yeah. I was reading books about biology at the time. Of course, they were for kids or whatever, but like, I was like, wait a minute. So like really early, I was like, oh, my parents will just make shit up. So like, of course, everybody must be making shit up to me if like, you know, wow. If my parents are.
I've been trusting forever. I still am pretty trusting, unfortunately. I have this thing, I've been trying really hard to work on it, but I still do it sometimes, where I lie out of like social nicety.
Like white lies?
I guess, yeah, just something to like make things less awkward. And
the ethics
it's a bad
around that are
habit because
really
then
confusing.
You get stuck in a web of lies, you know?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I would love to do a whole episode. Actually, that's another thing about radical honesty, because the ethics around lying get really confusing when it comes to like consent.
Yeah.
Like whether or not someone can. Would be going off on a huge tangent, but like the short version of this is like the standard culture, it is acceptable and expected that you do white lies in order to not hurt people's feelings,
right? Or
in order to go with whatever like the you know, like socially acceptable way to respond to certain things is. So doing radical honesty is actually subversive. Most people don't want it. I tried to do radical honesty, but like with people who have consented.
I always wondered, like, sometimes you'll be telling a story and then I'll just be like, okay, if I tell this as it happened exactly, it will be boring and take 10 times
Yeah.
as long. I can just make like a kernel of the story, which is not it's not a lie, but neither did it happen exactly this way.
I almost feel like that's a public service sometimes when
Yeah.
you're not altering the facts in a way that's going to mislead anybody in a
Yeah.
dangerous way, but you're just making a more exciting story or one that's more palatable to listen to.
That's how I think about it too. I don't really worry about it too much, but I do sometimes feel like I hope this isn't
Like, am I
misleading
being
anyone.
unethical right now?
Yeah, right.
By making a better story for my friends.
Yeah.
I'm holding back a bunch of anecdotes and sidebars because we're running low on time, but I do the same thing, and I feel dirty when I do it. Like, 'cause I'll be at work and I'm explaining, like, something that happened on the way in, and I'm like, well, I'll save them the long version, and then,
Right.
like, I feel like I'm not telling the truth, and I feel like that comes off, and it's weird, and I don't know a quick way around that.
I know what you mean.
Yeah,
We'll solve it later.
deal.
So yeah, the title of the post is Your Strength as a Rationalist, and the title line is, Your strength as a rationalist is your ability to be more confused by fiction than by reality. If you're equally good at explaining any outcome, you have zero knowledge.
That's on the boilerplate title page of my PhD dissertation.
Really?
The if you're equally good at explaining any outcome, you have zero knowledge. Yeah.
Nice.
Love it.
Good bumper
Ilya
sticker,
Zhirinovsky quote.
good tattoo.
Yeah, it would be. Yeah.
So, man, all right. Small digression. The only, when you're describing your mom, like having just like any model is better than no model, and not realizing that she's making up stuff as like on the fly, or not caring that she is.
Yeah.
It makes me think of that scene in Methods of Rationality when they're all trying to explain some big plot event that I don't want to spoil, but they're people who have been part of like the cult of, not the cult of Harry, but like in his sphere of influence, and they're like, well, luckily we're all perfectly sane, right? yeah, man,
right.
man, it must have sucked to be like the rest of those people, and like that's what I feel like right now,
I know.
but with the same sense of irony.
Yeah.
I still don't notice confusion. It's a skill I need to work on because, I don't know, lots of time when you're reading fiction, it may not be perfectly written, and you're like, okay, so the author flubbed a little here, but I don't want to be taken out of the story while I examine every little detail, so whatever. I'll be slightly confused and it'll clear up in a chapter or
It's
two.
the same thing you're doing in like the whole rest of your life. Well, this is
Yeah.
confusing. I don't want to not have my life make sense. Maybe
Right.
this. Yeah, that seems fine.
All right, I'll permit myself two other quick sidebars. One, I'm super gullible, and I'm trying to work on that. I don't know
I've had
why.
that problem too. Yeah.
We are a high trust community.
No, but even as a kid, I would believe the dumbest shit, and it would take minutes for it to go away. Like my biology teacher and my chemistry teacher in high school were both ex-hippies with beards, and one of them explained to me like, "Oh yeah, we were twins joined at the beard as kids," and like I spent like a minute unpacking that in my head. I'm like, that's not possible. But like I so trusted my teacher who was telling me this that like it. I spent a good minute dissecting that. Like, there's no way that's true.
It's gotta be a metaphor for something. What is that? What is beard?
But for a solid minute, I was trying to work into my world model how two people could be born joined at the beard. And yeah, so again, this is not like you could convince 5-year-old Steven something. This is, I don't know if I'd be that stupid today, but anyway.
You know, Jesse Cannonball Jenkins sometimes just has the flat affect deadpan kind of joking that he does with people. Yeah, and people like him.
I hate those.
Yeah, because they hold a straight face, and so when they just bullshit me, I'm like, really? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, oh, okay. And it's, the nice ones then say like, no, man, I'm just fucking with you. But every now and then I go around believing something for months, and it turns out it was just someone fucking with me.
I had a coworker like that, and I could share stories that were as humorous as that, but I'll save it and just jump on one thing that you said about assuming bullshit. My wife found something last night. We got a new cat that we're both terrified that something bad will happen to it. Something bad happened to our last cat, and she read that like the stuff in jet dry like wipes on the wood floors is toxic to pets. And then she showed me, or actually she went up to go look at the box in the closet. So I looked at her phone because it had the article on it. It was just a picture like shared on Facebook or something. And I'm like, oh, this is all the kinds of bullshit that people see. So I immediately called bullshit, but I didn't want to be like, it's fine, it's bullshit, and just call after her. So I went and looked, and then I actually read the thing, and then I was like, all right, you know what? Let's check to be 100% sure, because I'd be willing to bet you $100 right now that I'm right, but let's be sure. And there was a Snopes article that actually had the exact cut and paste. This is just a thing that's been going around for years.
Nice.
So
Good job.
But yeah, calling bullshit I think is a good default, and not to say push it away as bullshit and never accept the fact, but say, no, I'm not going to believe that right away until I verify it. Which brings us to our next LessWrong post.
Our next LessWrong post is Oh, snap. I lost my position.
I
in the
defy
document.
the data.
Thank you.
The title of the post.
Would you like to give the synopsis?
Sure. It opens with one of the great weaknesses of science is that it's this mistaken idea that if an experiment contradicts a dominant theory, we should throw out the theory instead of the experiment. And I agree with what you put in brackets there, that I don't necessarily think that's true, but that is sort of what you're supposed to think. Like, oh, we've just falsified Newtonian gravity. It's out. Throw it away. Maybe that's like the perceived ideal in high school science or something.
I think that's closer to it, yeah.
But that's not how science really works.
And also, like, this was written during the time of the great atheism debates on the internet, and a lot of, scientific proofs of God not existing, or scientific proofs that faith may have magic powers, were around at the time. And basically, lay people were using science very much in this sort of way, that, like, this experiment proved this, and therefore science is on my side. And so I don't think that, like, scientists necessarily maybe ever treated it this way, but a lot of at the time, the common perception was that this was sort of a thing. But I think this is one of these rare cases where Eliezer's lack of formal training in an actual academic setting shone through a bit, because I'm not sure real scientists thought that.
I feel like 10 years ago, I would have just believed this as it was, but like especially after reading a lot of Scott Alexander's posts about philosophy of science, I agree with you guys. That's not how it works, and that's not how it's supposed to work. But I mean, the post I think is salvageable, despite that.
Yeah, because there's lessons that you can take out of it that aren't necessarily about the truth of how academia works, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, basically, he's saying like if you get a new piece of data that that's why I think it's related to the previous post. It's like if you get a new piece of data that doesn't make sense to you, and it's just one piece of data, then you can just say, nah. You get one free, nah, and then give kind of the world a chance to prove that. Get a better experiment or something like that.
I think, yeah, he says that if it contradicts the standard model, it's an important fact that needs to be openly acknowledged. And I think he goes farther than that, which I like, when he says he like almost coins this term "defy the data," which, I mean, never caught on or anything, but he pointed out that, like, it would be interesting if experiments like this that contradicted the model were published, and with the note "published but defied," where someone, important member in the community could be like, I defy this data, I don't think it's true, and then there would be ongoing follow-up experiments or something.
This was posted before the
It was before the replication
crisis.
Yeah.
Which,
so in that sense, kind of foresaw it
yeah,
coming.
I don't know if that had anything to do with that, but I do remember I thought they kept going through the rationality community where people were talking about wishing that falsifications had more status.
Yeah.
Publishing, like, new data was always the highest status thing to do. Doing new experiments.
Yeah.
Exploring new areas, but like replicating and falsifying or confirming stuff was always kind of, it never made the front page of journals.
And I think that's one of the reasons we had the replication crisis.
Yeah,
no one who wanted to have a career in this would bother replicating things. It was not something that got published.
And no one would pay you to do an experiment that, well, we already know that works.
Right, yeah.
So.
And turns out there was p-hacking involved and, other bad things.
I think there was something that came out recently that showed even a bunch of meta-analyses tend to be skewed.
Yeah.
Where that's kind of upsetting.
Yeah.
But also kind of predictable.
Yeah. He even says, if someone defied the data, scientists could say, I'm holding my breath waiting for replication, rather than having to take sides. And like, literally, that's now what we do. Whenever I see a new article, I'm like, well, I'm going to wait for that to be replicated. Recently in the Discord, someone posted something about potential faster than light communication, which, first off, I just dismissed offhand, but it could, maybe. I don't know the physics behind this shit, so I'm just like, well, I'll wait for it to be replicated, because this is a popular science story about some possibly anomalous finding.
And when I was on Facebook, every 6 months I'm going to come across the front page that would be like, oh, look, we've got a cure for Alzheimer's. And I'm like, I saw this 3 years ago.
Those are the worst, yeah. The science reporting is so bad. Yeah. I don't even look at very much of the science reporting unless I know that it's from a source that, like, is very, very diligent about, like, fact checking and posting all their sources, but generally I'll go right to the publication.
I really love the Skeptic's Guide to the Universe. It's a podcast because specifically they ride this hobby horse a lot. They're like, these are the current popular articles this is why the news you're reading is fucking stupid. In the actual research, that's not what it says at all, because generally the articles you read are, you know, a reporter with maybe a little bit of science background reading this and finding the most crazy headline they could make to grab people's attention,
Or
right?
not even like, yeah, like I
So
remember a bunch of times looking at some crazy headline claiming something and then going and looking at the actual article it was based on and showing that it was actually saying the exact opposite
Yeah.
of what the headline said.
yeah, it's ridiculous. And so Skeptics Guide to the Universe does that almost every week, where they're like, here's a thing that's been published. You might hear about this from your crazy friends soon, but this is what the actual study was.
Man, I used to be on Facebook, like, being the asshole that was, like, the one person out of my 20 friends who have shared this thing being like, and here's the Snopes article.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I feel like I, like, made some enemies with people.
Yeah, that's my role on Facebook as well.
And then I just, like, mostly stopped going on Facebook except to share memes or to use Facebook Messenger with my few friends that refuse to use any other messaging app.
I really got to get that new one. Riot, is it, that Matt was talking about?
What?
The new message app.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know. The only reason I have
I
Facebook
have
is
so
to
many
coordinate
messaging
the
apps
LessWrong
now.
meetups.
Yeah, it's like, can we use less messaging apps?
I like Discord. I've basically stopped using Slack entirely in favor of Discord.
I do like Discord. It has a few flaws, but for the most part, that would be nice if I keep trying to find some kind of this is such a tangent app like messaging app aggregator. They claim to exist. There's a few that I've tried. None of them has impressed me yet. If any listeners know of one that works really well, I'd really appreciate a recommendation.
I like
Now I'm
Discord.
gonna shut up.
I like Discord because it has all the strengths and flaws of the old IRC
Yeah.
channels.
I like
and
it, but like, what
those
about
were
your
good.
friends that won't use anything but Facebook Messenger?
Yeah,
like they're
I
not
mean,
on
there's
Discord.
a reason I
so
still have
you're-
Facebook. Yeah.
All right, so
They actually are dead to you.
well, no, I use Facebook Messenger.
Oh,
not
yes.
Facebook,
Okay.
yeah.
All right.
I mean, so all right, back to the post. So,
Yes.
so here, you know, the anticipated reaction. I'll play the part of the person that he's reacting to. Well, so Eliezer, you're telling me that the person that says, oh well, experiment after experiment keeps showing that vaccines aren't causing autism, but they just get to keep saying I defy the data. That seems like a really stupid argument you're making there.
He says specifically, you can't defy the data on multiple experiments. At that point, you either have to relinquish the theory or dismiss the data by pointing to a design flaw or a larger body of experiments that fail to replicate it. He specifically is making this you can defy the data one time.
And it makes a lot of sense because like just file drawer effects by themselves are enough to explain away like, oh, we did one experiment that came up with a really weird finding. It's like, well, yeah, if you use what is it, a confidence interval of 0.05, it's going to happen all the time.
Yeah, there's lots of noise in data.
Yeah, all that means is, okay, run a real experiment on that topic now that you have found that finding. So, yeah.
Well, he does try to make replication higher status by this. I think it seems almost like this seemed like a hack to try to get more things replicated, because if someone prominent defied the data publicly, then, you know, that would be news. And then the replicators could get their names in the journals as the people who, you know, either confirmed or not denied, but
Defied.
confirmed or defied. Yeah, the defile. Confirm or deny the defile, and then God damn it, denial. Thank you. And then the person who denied the data either gets more status for, you know, sticking their neck out and defying this data, or gets to make look like an idiot when the replication went through, and they're like, oh, okay, my bad, I guess.
Or they get props for denying the data when it looks deniable.
Right.
That's how it should be, right?
Or it's just neutral. Yeah.
It would be good to have a hack that makes replication higher status somehow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But this never
Interestingly,
caught on.
in that sentence about you either have to relinquish the theory or dismiss the data, neither of those are, or you have to update your model and say that you were wrong and the data is actually right. I'm surprised that wasn't one of the either's.
He does say defying the data admits that the data is not compatible with your theory. Sticks your neck out so your head can be easily chopped off.
Yeah.
People are like, turns out your theory was wrong, Mr. Feynman.
Reminds me of Einstein, like some experimental result disagreed with his prediction for like some eclipse measurement. And he was like, they did their experiment wrong.
Nice.
Yeah. And it was funny because it turned out that they did do their experiment wrong, but his prediction was also slightly wrong. But then he had a chance to correct his theory by the time the next eclipse rolled around or the next experiment. So, but he came out looking good, obviously.
Yeah.
Because he's Einstein.
Yeah.
So.
But to your point, what you were saying, yeah, I do think people can and often do take this to a way big extreme where they're like, I just defy any data that doesn't fit what I believe.
Yeah, but by that point, you're not playing in the spirit of the rules, and you're just rationalizing anyways. So,
Yeah.
yeah. Which is an
more
unfortunate
rigorous thing.
accident of English language history that rationalization and rationality are so closely tied together.
Yeah.
Want to wrap this up? Think of hatred and call it a night?
Let's see. For next time, our less wrong posts will be absence of evidence is evidence of absence, and conservation of expected evidence.
There was a whole book I read on that first post. That I think before I read Less Wrong, and I'd like to know if I had his name when I started that sentence and I forgot it. But the book was called God: The Failed Hypothesis. And he says that the lack of elephant footprints and droppings in Yellowstone National Park are evidence that there aren't elephants that live there.
Right.
Is the example that he gives at the
That's
beginning.
by Victor Stenger.
Thank you. Yes, who used to teach, I think, in Boulder. I think he subsequently has died. I missed a talk that he went to, and I really should have gone. But yeah, Victor Stenger wrote that book. It's nice to have somebody with a computer handy.